Hello, I'm Terrell Sanders. I'm the Executive Director of MinistryCOM. Welcome to our monthly webcast. This is our first webcast with Skype. We've got Evan McBroom here via Skype, and we've tested all this technology, and hopefully it holds together for the next hour. Just a brief intro for anybody here that's new to MinistryCOM. MinistryCOM is a national group that does church communications. We support church communications directors. We've got a national conference coming up in Dallas this year, October 20th and 22nd. Details are online at MinistryCOM.org. You're probably on that site right now watching this webcast. We've got a number of different tracks, a technology track, a web track, social media, and we also got a basics of church communication. That's the one that Evan is going to lead for us, or is coordinated for us. And then we also have a number of educational resources that will be on the website. The website's in a transition right now. We're updating the website, but we have a number of resources that will be online here very quickly. These webcasts happen on the third Thursday of every month, except next month is October, which will be our conference. They're normally at noon. We're going to move these back to 1 o'clock Central Time, so whatever time zone you're in now, next month we'll be back 1 hour later than this. The purpose is to provide some resources between our conferences. Not everybody can come to our conferences, and so we're trying to provide some resources and some people like Evan that have great expertise between our conferences and something that can be used locally. There will be Q&A time. You are able to log into the chat and make comments on the chat. Evan can see the chat. I can see the chat. He'll be able to take some questions. He's going to talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and take Q&A. But feel free, since there's some lag in the system here, feel free to ask questions while he's talking. Evan, thank you for joining us. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you. Very good. All the wires are working. Evan's an old friend. He's been a big supporter of MinistryCOM for a long time. His company is Fishhook. He's in beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana. His company does creative marketing and communication stuff, mostly with churches, I guess.
About 95% of the work now is for
90%, 5% from the churches. Evan's on our board of directors, and he's just been a great person helping MinistryCOM out. And he's going to lead. He's put together the track. He's going to be the dean of our basic training track this year, and he will be a speaker. He's doing a keynote session this year. But Evan, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of turn this over to you and talk to us a little bit. We've got a handout posted on the website, on the sidebar of the website. You can click on the handout, which is what Evan's going to refer to. But talk to us a little bit. You've done a lot of work with churches, and you know an awful lot about church communications. Tell us what you can share with our group today for the next 45 minutes or so.
Well, thanks, Terrell. Yeah, absolutely. And Terrell, it's great to be with you today, and great to have this opportunity to share. When you do this work day in and day out, I think sometimes you can just kind of become so comfortable with it. You just sort of start to assume that everybody knows this stuff. But we realize that a lot of people are new or newer to the role of church communication director. And so this session today is really specifically for you, the person who is new or newer, and it very much is aimed at the same audience that we have designed the basics track for MinistryCOM. The basic track is really ideally designed for the person who's the 1 or 2 person communication department, and they have to be the jack of all trades. And so we're really speaking to that group today. And if that's not you, I hope you'll still stay with us, because hopefully through the Q&A or some of the things that we've learned from working with other churches, hopefully there's still something you can gain from today. Absolutely, my heart beats for the local church. And I love the fact that our team gets to come alongside and peek behind the veil and see what's going on inside so many different local churches, individual congregations. And I always tell people, it's not necessarily that we're so smart. I think it's a matter of the fact that we get to see what's going well and what's not going well in a lot of different places. And through that experience, we're able to cross-pollinate ideas from one place to the other. So really that's what today is about. At MinistryCOM, I'm going to talk about some very big, broad changes, big, broad issues, challenges. This would be outside of the basics track. But in the large room, I'm going to cover some things about why do churches struggle with a lack of clarity about vision and priorities, and some of the problems that have to do with inconsistent and ineffective leadership communication. Maybe in your church you struggle with decentralized communications, or the challenges of generational preferences. You have some folks in your congregation who are older and some who are younger. Age doesn't necessarily split down the digital divide, but definitely you have people who generationally communicate and receive communication differently. And then issues like a weak brand presence and those types of things. Those are big, broad issues. Today, I really want to dive down into the basics of the job, the basics of the role of the church communication director. And this is born out of the experience that we have of coaching and coming alongside and church communication directors, especially those who are new or newer in the role, to help them figure out what are the big things that I need to be doing in my job. So that's really the focus. And I want to start kind of with what is the landscape? What's going on inside many churches that makes this such a hard job? And I don't know if that's your experience or not, but we hear over and over again, whether it's the church administration, the administrative executive pastor or the administrative pastor, or maybe it's the executive secretary or the secretary in a 200-person church who's trying to figure out what to do with communications. Why is the job such a challenge, and what's going on inside the church? Well, I think there's basically, let me scroll up here, I think there's basically about 5 things that came at least top of mind to me that make this such a challenging role. First, churches are very busy places. Ministry leaders are passionate, and you want that. But the average church, and again, whether it's 200-person, 2,000 people or more, a church is usually a pretty busy place with lots of departments and lots of leaders. And you want people who are passionate about their ministry, but sometimes that passion and that busyness just creates a lot of noise and a lot of too much information. I remember the first time I sat down with a large staff. This was 6.5, 7 years ago. And this was a church of 2,500 weekly attendance. They had 8 or 9 pastors on staff, and they had probably a total staff with part-time people, maybe around 40 folks. And what they shared with me is we don't have anyone in charge of communication. And that kind of scared me, and it came clear when I saw that they had a 16-page weekly worship folder with all types of announcements and too much information and very little organization. And one of the pastors, it was the worship pastor, his name was Bob, and Bob says, Evan, what we feel like as the leaders of our ministries is we feel like we're all trying to jump through a funnel, the same small funnel to get to our audience, to get to the people of the congregation. And everybody's just trying to figure out how to jump through that funnel. And I kind of chuckled, and I said, Bob, I think you're close with your analogy, but you're not exactly right. I think actually what happens is every one of the pastors, every one of the ministry leaders in this church just has a fire hose. And you are at will and at your own discretion just turning on that fire hose of information, and you're really just soaking your congregation. And what your congregation really needs is that funnel, is that little bit of information at the right time, lined up with the strategy of your church. So kind of picture that. Are you living in a world that is a fire hose kind of world? If so, you're facing one of, I think, the basic challenges. I think another issue or basic challenge for the new or newer communication director is the fact that you're probably walking into ancient, established processes, people and processes that have just kind of been doing the same thing the same way, and most likely it's been either haphazard or non-strategic. And living in that kind of an environment and trying to figure out how do I rework these processes, because often what times will happen is a new person comes in and the leadership just kind of they expect change, but they expect you to just do what Betty used to do in the front office, or just take over that role without necessarily retweaking the process or redesigning it. So I think that's a key challenge that you face. I think another issue that a lot of people face is that leaders surprise their congregation with new initiatives. Basic challenge is a lot of times the leadership of the church has been working on some things behind the scenes so long and for so long that they tend to just surprise their congregation with these things. And if you're, depending on where you sit in the leadership structure, they may be surprising you with those things on Sunday morning as well. And so that's a challenge, is that oftentimes leaders don't kind of see the separation in what they know and what they understand and where the congregation understand. So that's another basic challenge. I would say oftentimes a challenge is that everything is kind of put out at the same volume. And so that means that the Invite a Friend to Easter initiative is sometimes presented with the same promotional invitation as the Model Train Ministry is having their regular meeting. And so, again, without structure and processes in place, everything's kind of at the same volume. And then also, some of you also may be living in that world where somebody just hands a piece of paper to the senior pastor on Sunday morning and says, "Hey, Tom, will you announce the chili cook-off?" And so, again, that world is not a very easy place for you to work in. I think also a challenge that you face is that oftentimes in the church, there's lots of advice, but not a lot of help. And I want to read, this is an email that one of our clients sent to us, and with the headline of "Grrr." And she said, here it is, and I've changed the names in the name of the church to protect the innocent. Susan. So this is from a well-meaning person in the congregation. Susan, the use of RSVP in our church communications is becoming increasingly irritating to me. It appears twice in the August newsletter, email, and is used regularly in other communications, including from the pulpit. The problem is that RSVP means please respond. And this is where it gets very helpful. In French, English, and American etiquette, RSVP requests a response from all invitees, whether that response is positive or negative. Surely we don't want negative responses from people invited to events at our church and in other communications. And then, of course, there's a link to Wikipedia to give a little more background on RSVP. And so this helpful grammar police person suggests, I recommend that you discontinue the use of the abbreviation RSVP in all church communications and request others who make announcements or send notices of events to do the same, unless, of course, replies are from all invitees are required. If you need a count or a list of the people to attend, I suggest using the phrase, please respond to fill in the name if you plan to attend, or some similar phrase. I realize that RSVP is widely misunderstood and misused in our society. However, just because everyone is doing something doesn't make it right. I'd be interested in your response to this. I'm not exactly sure what Susan's response is, but my response would be, it would be awesome? We need writers. And since you have a good grasp of the English language, why don't you come and join the communications team and help us do some writing? And so, anyway, a basic challenge is, I believe, that you're working in an environment where you have lots of bosses, lots of input, lots of advice, and oftentimes not very much help. Okay, another basic challenge I think that you face is that the congregation has their own busy life to lead. They're busy families, even the seniors are busy. There's so much to do. And oftentimes, if the numbers are low at a church event, you may ask people, or the pastor may ask people, why didn't you come? And the response may be, well, I didn't really know about it, or I didn't hear anything about it. Was that this last weekend? And I think actually what happens is sometimes the busyness of life overtakes, sets our priorities, and the white lie is sometimes a little bit easier than the truth. So just knowing people are busy. And so busy church and busy lives, you're all competing, everybody's competing for the attention and allegiance of the people that we're communicating to. And then I would say just another challenge is oftentimes as the new communication director is brought in, there's a phrase that's tossed around, you know what we need around here? We need a gatekeeper. And so if you've been hired into this role and you're working in this role under the idea that you're going to be a gatekeeper, that I think is the wrong picture and the wrong image. So we're going to look at some other ways and approaches and some advice to help around some of those things. So today, moving from the challenges, the things I want to explore are some of the basic and fundamental job descriptions. What are some of the basic questions? Kind of what shape are you in as a communication director? And what does your job description look like? And what are your responsibilities? And so kind of have broken this down into how are you viewed by leadership? How are you viewed by others? What is the skill set that's required? And then we're going to take a look at a tool that may be helpful to you in assessing where you and your team are. So that gives you a picture of where we're going. Here we go. How are you viewed by leadership? I think that, and I heard this said one time by a communication director who, she was viewed by leadership really as someone from the admin pool and not a trusted advisor, not in the inner circle of leadership. And so in her role, she said, Evan, I spend so much time being an investigative reporter. I spend all my time going around the halls, asking questions, trying to find out what was decided at the last meeting. And that's where that issue of new initiatives are surprised on the congregation and surprised on the communication director. So how are you viewed? And I'd ask you to kind of contemplate that question for a second and write that down. Are you an investigative reporter in the admin pool, or are you a trusted advisor? And I would say, and I tell executive pastors and pastors this all the time, if their director of communication, if the staff meeting that they attend each week is dealing with issues like what's the cleaning schedule for the building, or what kind of toilet paper do we have, or what's our process for, handling some office administrative issue, locks and keys. And, if you're in the administrative or building facilities pool, if you're in that staff meeting, you're in the wrong spot, I believe. I believe your church has you in the wrong spot. And so I would ask you a question of positioning, and that is, where do you sit? And I strongly believe that a communication director who is truly going to be effective has to be sitting at the leadership table with the head leaders, the key leaders of the church. And in doing that, the communication director needs to have both access to leadership and work with them in a way that garners their respect. So it may be a listening seat, not a speaking seat at first, but absolutely the communication function at the church, that person, for it to be really tied to strategy and for it to really, that person to really be effective, they have to be in that leadership, at that leadership table. In doing so, they start to become informed of the leadership priorities and decisions. They're involved in the conversation of what's going on in the life of the church, what is ahead, what are our long-range plans. And so they can hear weeks, months, or a year about initiatives that are coming, about ministry priorities, about what's the main thing and what are the secondary things that are going on in the life of that church. And without access to that table, a monthly check-in with the senior pastor, or every other week, or even every week for just a few minutes, that's good, but it's not great. And so my advice would be, you need to have those conversations with the leadership of the church to say, how can I get positioned to be at least a listening seat at the key leadership table? Okay, another key about how are you viewed by leadership? How is your job structured? Ask yourself this question. Do you have time in your job to proactively plan and work with the leaders of your church, both at a church-wide level and at a ministry-specific level, to support those communication needs? Do the leaders of the church see you just as a doer? Oh, so-and-so, he makes the bulletin. So-and-so, he makes the sermon slides and puts out the... Or do they see you as a person who is, again, that trusted advisor at the high level and also at the ministry level? You have time in your job to proactively plan and work with the leaders. And I believe that that this is key and core to what to the job, to being effective in the job. I think another thing is, how are you viewed by leadership? Is it a priority in your job for you to lead and manage other staff, whether they report to you or not? Can you lead other staff in the area of communication, and are you given that authority and that encouragement? And also, do you have volunteers? Do you have staff and volunteers who help you implement communication strategies? If you're viewed as you're down the hall, you're in the corner, and you work quietly and you never interact with people, then I think from a leadership standpoint, your leaders don't see you in the right spot, and maybe you don't see yourself in the right spot. And then I think also, just in terms of integrated into the life of the church, you absolutely have to be able to share the values and uphold the church's beliefs, styles, and values as a church. The role of the communication director is not to release their own message, but to help release the message of the church leaders. And oftentimes I've consulted with and worked with leadership teams, church communication directors, where there's a friction. And the friction comes in the fact that the leadership or the senior pastor has one message, and the communication director has a different message. And if those things aren't aligned, then advise and counsel where you can, but you need to be able to understand that your role is to help release the message of leadership. Let me glance over here to see if there's any questions before we go on to the next section. Question has come in: are there aspects of the communication director that are similar at 500, 1500, and 2500, or will this have to be remade at each growth stage? I would say that a lot of the things that we're talking about so far absolutely are the same. Now, in a church of 500, you may be half-time staff, and you may have 2 or 3 volunteers. But I would still hope you had access to leadership. I would still hope you would be collaborating and leading other ministries. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. The same should be true if you're at a 2,500-person church. And so relative to these issues, yes, I think they're the same. Throughput, how much you can get done, what your budget, those types of things, those are going to, it's more in the execution and the implementation. It would be in your 200, 300, and 400 level classes that those differences would apply. But I believe that fundamentally, at the core, this stuff still applies no matter the size of the church. And if you agree, disagree, chime in, and I'll follow along and watch that in a little bit. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and I want to jump in here too, because I think
go for it.
The thing that you said here, the number one point, you have to be at the leadership table to be the communications, to effectively do communications. I mean, that's just so huge, because so many churches that I've been around see the comm person as a steno job. It's a stenographer, it's a typesetter. They just make words and make pictures. But right. President Obama has got his communications director in the meeting. Now, the comm director does not tell Obama what to think. He doesn't set strategy, but he makes sure that he helps him figure out the right way to say it and deal with all the landmines that go with politics. I mean, right. British Petroleum, talk about a company with communications problems. BP has struggled with that. Any major corporation, any major celebrity has a communications director who just helps them present their message. The comm director doesn't particularly help them form the message, but they help them present it and help them make sure that whatever words we choose, whatever images we choose, don't have ramifications that are going to bite us tomorrow. And just having that comm director in the leadership meeting doesn't mean that you're a leader, doesn't mean that you're setting strategy, but you've got to be there to help really understand, so that when you do try and pitch it, you're pitching it as it was intended. And so many churches that I've worked with, that's just the first flaw right there, is that the comm director doesn't hear about it until it goes on the website and it's time to write an article about it.
Right. And it's not necessarily that that the leadership made a conscious decision, let's not tell Bill about this. Mm-hmm. But because Bill, if that's the communicator, if they're not at the table, they're not involved. And you're right. So I would encourage you, Terrell, continue to listen along. And what are those other things that jump out? To me, that's primary. Mm-hmm. That's primary. And usually, as I start having this conversation with communication directors, this is about the time where they start crying, I've been telling them this the same thing. And so this may not be anything new. If anything, maybe it's just a misery loves company, or that's what other people think. So if you're stuck in the closet down the hall with the phone machine hanging over your background, over your shoulder, and you don't get out much, get out and find a way to get yourself at that leadership table. If not every week, some of the time. All right, should we move on?
Yes.
All right. Let's talk here a little bit about that's how you're viewed by leadership. How do you view yourself, and how do you view your job, your specific job. And I want to go back to that word gatekeeper. Again, I've heard so many administrative pastors, executive pastors, senior pastors, when they're about to hire their first communication person, or maybe they're just struggling with communications. So we got to get somebody in here to be a gatekeeper. And I'd like to suggest, at a minimum, 2 other kinds of models that we could look at. Because a gatekeeper suggests conflict. And yes, there will be conflict in this job, but that's not the role. So I want to give 2 other kind of analogies. One would be the air traffic controller, or even better, the orchestra conductor. An air traffic controller beautifully works with everybody, not shutting them off and turning them on, but helping everybody understand, all the airplanes figure out how do we take off and how do we land safely at the right time, at the right pace, so we don't have any wrecks, have any plane crashes. An orchestra conductor works with everybody to create one beautiful song, so that everything's at the right volume and everything's at the right tempo and pace. Those kind of images, to me, are a better image than a gatekeeper. And I guess I'd ask you to write down these 2 words and think about which one are you. Do you feel like you're viewed in working with the ministry leaders in your church as an adversary or an ally? If it's an adversarial relationship, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that, then you probably have yourself set up as a gatekeeper, and you probably have yourself set up in a role and functioning kind of as an order taker. People come to you and ask for stuff, and you either say, yes, I can do it, or no, you can't do that. And I would like to encourage you to think about that idea of being a communications ally. And I always say, all of this stuff starts with coffee, or it starts with a meal. And I don't know what your budget is as a communication director, but I would have enough money in there to buy every lead ministry leader in your church coffee, soda, ice cream, whatever it is you're up for, at least once a month. Then on a monthly basis, you're sitting down, and A, you're getting to know each other in relationship, and B, you're helping them look out a week, a month, 3 months, 6 months, and a year. And what you're doing is you're saying, if you sit down with children's ministry, let me learn what's going on in children's ministry, what your big priorities are, do you have a big recruiting season, what are your significant events, when is promotion Sunday where all the kids move up, are we doing VBS this year, are we doing a community backyard thing this year, so that you are coming alongside and saying, I'm really interested in what you're doing, and help me learn your ministry schedule and pace and calendar, and I want to jump in and help you get your communication message released. So if you do that with children's, and then you go do that with students, and then you go do that with women's, and they'll be up for meeting like 3 times a week, then you go, and students won't ever really want to meet with you, but you can get them to, bribe them with the coffee. If you do that with everybody, and at the same time you're sitting in on the senior leadership meetings, you now have a picture of the passions of all the ministries that you're there to serve, and you have an understanding whether the strategy is clearly articulated or you're just hearing the strategy and the priorities of the leadership. You now can start to figure out, how does all that work together? And so I would say you want to think about these 3 words: coffee, collaborate, calendar. And if you do that, if you can sit down with the ministry leaders, sit down over coffee, collaborate with them, look at their calendar, now you're going to be able to start listening to them for who are their audiences, what's the messaging, what are the goals they have, what does success look like to them. And that then, here's the beautiful thing. At first, ministry leaders often, as a new communication director comes into the role, oftentimes there's 2 responses. Some of the staff is waiting by your door on your first day. And as soon as you walk in, they pounce on you. Thank goodness you're here. Here's a stack of all my stuff. It looks horrible. I want it to look better. Or there are people who are down the hall, they're hiding out, and really want to collaborate. And so if you can get in this collaborating mode, and if you can help them start to communicate, and I would say look for one success story. And when this goes well with one ministry leader, celebrate that at a staff meeting and talk it up and have them talk it up. Do it over and over and over again. Here's what's going to happen in the end. Those ministry leaders will be freed to do their ministry, and you will help them get their communications done, and it's going to release a bunch of time that they don't have to mess with this stuff. And, we could probably all picture somebody on the staff who, their heart and passion is for kids, but they end up spending half a day trying to make a postcard to promote, volunteers are needed, or there's an ice cream event, or bring a friend. And I just think if we freed that person to not have to mess around with that postcard, and instead freed them to do core things in their ministry that are core to reaching kids, teaching kids, loving kids, leading them to Jesus, how awesome would that be? So you help them with their communication. It frees them to do their ministry. All right. Let me look and see if there's some any questions. Or Terrell, before we shift to the next segment here.
A good point to jump in there. Making that transition from order taker to partner or order taker to consultant. I know even in our commercial business, some clients come to us and say, I want this, I want this, I want this, and all they want you to do is assemble it for them. And it's like, well, I can do that, but you're maybe asking the wrong questions. Other clients come in and say, I want to achieve this goal. How can my website do that? And that's a lot better client, because we can say, okay, well, here's some things. We can do some things you didn't think of. If you just come in and ask for A, B, C, D, and I just give you A, B, C, D, and it doesn't work, whose fault is that? And I know in so many churches, the comm people are seen as the in-house Kinkos. I'm just going to go to them, and I want a brochure, I want a postcard, I want a logo, I need by Friday, here's my colors, I'll be back on Friday. And they don't really come back and say, well, here's the event I'm trying to do, here's the audience I'm trying to reach, here's what I want to accomplish. Is the postcard the solution for that, or is there a better way? As you make that transition, you can become more effective, and you're more effective for them. I mean, and again, like you said, they're not playing with the tools themselves. They're relying on you now. Any questions on this?
I lost there for just a second. I lost a little bit of what you were saying, Terrell, but I think it was a statement and not a question for me.
I was agreeing with you. I was saying you were brilliant.
Oh, good. Oh, I love when people agree with me. Perfect. Looking here, how do you balance paper and web communications timing? I would. This is a little tactical thing. Let's dive into that tactical thing, and then I'll jump back out. I would say I encourage it. I don't think it's about timing. I think you have to deliver both. And the analogy that I use is that kind of a generational thing. Let's say it's not always generational, but the paper people, they are willing to have a drink of water. You can give them a drink of water. You can give them a bottle of water. You can give them the stuff, their information, packaged up in print, and you can hand it to them, and they'll drink it right there in the sanctuary. They might put it in their purse, but they're fine setting it down and coming back to it next week and getting their next dose. Web people, they want to have a magic drinking fountain of information that they can carry around with them at any moment in their pocket in their computer. And so, to me, it's not about timing. To me, it's about both. You have to be communicating. If you have multiple generations, print people and web people, you have to be dealing with both of those at the same time. So let them drink the way that they want to drink. Glasses of water for some, magic drinking fountain on the web for the others. All right, I'm going to roll on here, and I would encourage you to download this if you have not. This is a tool that Terrell. This is sitting on the over on the right-hand side under the August webcam handout, correct?
Right. It's on the website. They can download it. They just right-click and save as.
Great. This is a little tool that we have developed to help communication directors think about some of the basic skill sets. There are 9 of them represented here. It's not a magic list. You can put other things in this list, but these are some of the core competencies and capabilities that I think are necessary in the role. And so first I'm going to talk through each of these, and then I just want to talk to you about how the handout can work for you or your team. I would say in terms of skill set, when we talk with churches about designing the job of church communication director, these are some of the key things they need to be looking for. Now, it's unlikely they're going to find all of these things in one person, and that's where the idea of a team comes into place. But let's just take a look at these things. We believe, starting at the top, relationship with leaders and others, the relationship skills is one skill set that's really key. We've talked about that quite a bit. The next would be, how are they, relationally with leaders is one thing, but how are they at team leadership? And some of you may be saying, what team? I don't have it, the team is me. Well, if you don't have one, I think you definitely need one. And that's going to be built on relationships. I never encourage anybody to just use kind of the blanket, hey, we're looking for communication volunteers. You can try that, but don't count. I mean, any of us involved in communication for very long know that's probably not the best way to get those people flushed out and into view. So a personal ask. And Terrell, I know of one church here in Indianapolis on the south side. I believe it was Mount Pleasant Christian Church. Give them props for this. They did a pretty tricky thing. They were looking for photographers, graphic designers, artists, writers. And what they did in terms of trying to find and develop a team, they put on an art gallery. They built an art gallery, and they put an open call out and did asked invitations for people to display their art, their photography, their graphic design, and electronic media artwork, sculpture, writing, all this stuff. Well, if you ask people for volunteers, you may not have very many people come out of the woodwork. But when they did this, and I think they built it around Easter, they had a bunch of people come and display their artwork and their writing and their poetry. And so then what they did on a Tuesday afternoon, as this stuff was all set up, the communication director and a couple others, they wandered around and looked at all the stuff and said, wow, look at that photography. That's awesome. Look at this poetry and this writing. This is great. Look at this. And so then they were able to just place phone calls or connect with those people and make personal invitations. Hey, we loved your stuff. And we'd love for you to come and attend a meeting where we're going to learn about, we're building a communication team, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe that's one of those wise as serpents, innocent as dove sort of moves, but I encourage it. So back to the skill set, you have to be able to lead a team. Graphic design, I mean, some, publisher, or whether it's all the high-end tools and Photoshop and Creative Suite, some sort of graphic design is going to be needed to be done in this job. Again, from the individual communication director or from a team. You're going to need to write things. And I would encourage that there's kind of three lengths of writing that you need. You need people who can, you need to be able to write feature-length stories, kind of testimonies. You need to be able to write promotionally, short but with some detail, kind of for event promotion. And then you need to be able to write Twitter length. And so think about the writing skills as a key skill set. Web and e-strategies, there are very many tools. If you build a team, think very wisely and don't get backed into a corner. And Terrell, I'm sure you see this time and time again from your web clients that, somebody goes off, well-meaning, loving ministry volunteer, but they build a website that nobody else can control, nobody else can have input, and the thing's held hostage when they go off to college or they change cities or they get burned out or change churches or whatever. So, but web and e-strategies is a big piece.
Yeah, I've seen that once or twice, that's for sure.
I bet you have. Another job skill set within the communication department or person would be the ability to do some video work, to tell testimonies, to be able to think about how to develop a script or do an interview. And, back in the day when I did a lot of video work in the corporate world, we had a crew of 5 or 6 people and lighting and $2 million worth of gear. And, now a little flip video camera is fine for a lot of things. Make sure the audio is good for so that people can hear it and understand it. But I definitely would say that video is a key component of the job. This one is hard because I think sometimes people think creativity, well, that's just the designer. Creativity, oh, that's just so. I think creativity is in everybody's job. My accountant even is creative. Yesterday we had a retreat and he led a little session to help us all understand where the money goes, and he had us doing an exercise dividing pennies up into piles. It was awesome. So don't think, oh, I'm not the graphic designer, I'm not creative. But having the ability to generate big hooks, brainstorming, collaborations. And so from a creativity standpoint, that's a chunk of the job. Project management, absolute. Oh, yep.
I'm not sure in Indianapolis how it works. Where I am in Oklahoma, creative accounting is considered to be a bad thing.
Well, yeah, I understand that analogy could be bad, but I don't mean my accountant.
We're not recommending creative accounting at MinistryCOM, but we can have creative accountants. Yeah.
Exactly. He is a creative accountant. Thank you. Here's one key about project management. Projects have to get done. Sunday keeps coming, Saturday keeps coming. You have to be able to have a project management function within you or within your team. And then finally, we talked about this quite a bit earlier, communication planning, looking out ahead, connecting strategy and missioning with the calendar, church-wide and to ministry level. So, how's this tool work? This is going to be like one of those cooking shows, where they show you how to mix it up, and then they pull it out of the oven, it's done. Here's what I just encourage you to do. I would encourage you to print one of these off for yourself, for anybody else, if you have a team, for your volunteers if you have any. And I would just do a little self-assessment and think about going through and circling where do you fall, 1 being low, 5 being high. And in this exercise, as I look at this, relationship with leaders, this person put them at a 3, leading the team at a 2, graphic design at a 4, writing at a 2. So I'm guessing this guy's kind of a designer more than a writer. Web strategies at a 3. Must have some video skills because they're at a 5. Creativity is at a 4. Project management is a 4. And communication planning is at a 2. Not surprising when we work with communication directors to find that sometimes those who are designers or web people, video, they love to get a hold of the project. They're not necessarily as strong on the planning side. Sometimes the planners can make a beautiful plan, but they can't design or create something, to save their life. And so this is how this person's snapshot looked. At that point then, step 2, take this and connect the dots. And I don't think it's realistic, and I don't think it fits with the idea of, like Marcus Buckingham's book, Now Discover Your Strengths. I don't think what we're looking for is a well-rounded individual, because I don't think you're going to find somebody, maybe they just have an inflated view of how they are at all these jobs and they give themselves a 5. But I think it's realistic to say that a person, an individual, is going to come up and look not like a round wheel, but like some sort of a star-shaped thing. The key then is to go down the side of the paper here and answer these questions. In this case, assess your wheel. What are your strengths? In this case, it was design, video, creative, and project management. Where are your flat spots? Where are your wheel flats? Writing, leading the team, working with leaders, planning, and the web. What are some strengths, or what are some ways to maximize the strengths? In this case, the person said, do more storytelling with video. They're going to maximize that strength since they don't necessarily have the strong writing to tell the stories with video. And how are they going to address some flat spots? They need to recruit more team members. They need to work on their own leadership development. And this person thought, develop a planning retreat that could pull together more of their team to do the communication planning, not left on their own, in their own office, but really bring people together and do that. And then also for the web, some conference training, conferences or training, or create a network of people to brainstorm with and pick ideas off of. So I just really encourage you to think about this. And again, a caution, don't think I have to be well-rounded. Don't think you have to be well-rounded. But ideally, over time, look for the weak spots and try to figure out, can I beef up some of these weaker areas by adding to my team? I would probably say the one area, leading the team in relationship with others. If you're weak in those areas, that's probably not adding to the team. It's either putting yourself in a different job or improving your leadership skills. And I would love to see you improve your leadership skills. Terrell, what jumps out at you there?
Well, I mean, the idea of just not having to be everything, in my background working with technology and delivering communications, I've hired creative people and programming people and accounting people and project management people, and no one does all of them well. And the few people that think they do are usually wrong, at least in my mind. I mean, the guy that comes in that says, I'm an excellent programmer and excellent designer and excellent people person and a great salesman, never works out in any of those. I mean, it always works out to have people that are strengths, and the idea of having a team, whether it's a staff team or a volunteer team or a combination, you just kind of got to get to that point to realize that one person can't do it all.
Correct. They can't. And a lot of times it's a big move for a church to add one person. And so, well, why can't so-and-so do it all? Well, because they're not completely the full circle of all those things. So anyway, I'm answering a real quick question. Somebody asked, 36845 asked, what strategy do you have for the church secretary who's also been asked to do communication and really has no idea how to do that? Well, first they need to attend MinistryCOM. And then their second step, well, I think first off, it's, is that the right ask? They've been asked to do communications. Well, I could be asked to do accounting, but I can't balance my checkbook. Going back to the account, I'm horrible at it. I get highs. So is it in their skill set? I would say, this kind of an assessment with that person would be one place to start. Whether they fill it out or you fill it out for them, kind of based on your knowledge of where they are. If you've got a little circle of ones and twos, they may not be the person. They need to have some strength in some area. But we've seen a lot of church secretaries who have made that change in that evolution. And I would say networking with other people in your community, find some churches who are your size or a little bit larger, and find those churches that are communicating well, and give that church secretary time in his or her schedule to go and meet one-on-one, and not like once a year, but on an ongoing basis. We do a lot of coaching with people who are moving into this role, and from my standpoint, it's a high number of sessions that are longer for a period of time, and then fewer sessions that are shorter, and then eventually just some touch bases. And so I would encourage you, if that's the role you're going to take, and it can be a good one, get them outside of your church to do some networking and coaching. And then I would just say the other thing is they have to be empowered. You're never a prophet in your own hometown, right? It can be very difficult for the church secretary to make that move to leadership table unless the leaders invite her in, and unless the leaders empower that person to have the kind of conversations that they need to have and to have the leadership. So I'd move their desk. I'd get them a different computer. I would do the things that people do that say you're not in the same role that you used to be in, and make that change. So, all right. Other questions, Terrell? Do you have anything? Let me look over here.
I really appreciate your helping us out here and your comments. Evan's going to be at MinistryCOM. He's going to do a keynote session which talks about these challenges that are common to all churches. He's going to help lead this whole track on basic training. MinistryCOM is the resource for that one person that's trying to do everything, and we've tried really hard to collect those resources. The website, unfortunately, is in a bit of a flux right now. We're trying to convert all of our old resources to a new format, and that's taken longer than I wanted, if you can imagine that ever happening. But very soon we will have our full library. We've got about 60 past sessions on everything from how to write for the web to how to do video. So we've got a lot of great content already. We've got the conference coming up in October, and I really would say if any of you are new to communications or struggling with that one-person office, this is the only place you're going to get 2 days of really dedicated training. And we say national conference. MinistryCOM's never been playing in the world of high experience. We don't have rock bands. We don't have huge names, but almost all of our speakers at MinistryCOM are church comm directors, or they are people like Evan that are full-time vendors that work with churches. So we have a lot of experience with the trenches at MinistryCOM. We haven't tried to bring in big name speakers just for their presentation value. We've tried to really come back, look at content, and everyone that's speaking, everyone that's presenting at MinistryCOM has got years of experience. They're great people to talk to in the hallway and ask questions like this. So we're trying real hard to provide the people that you need to get these answers. To the person that commented about the web link and the making the web link open, I apologize for that. That's a fair comment. had some changes to the website. The website made a little hiccup last night. I was doing some last-minute changes this morning and ran out of time, but we'll have a better way to do handouts next time.
And Terrell, let me just mention one other thing. And again, in addition to kind of the makeup of who are the presenters and the speakers that come, having been a MinistryCOM all but 1 year, I think over and over what I hear from the people that I know that attend is half of what they get is from the people who come and attend the conference.
Yes.
The networking, the crying on the shoulder, the encouragement to realize that you're not alone. And it's not just about moping together, but then to be able to say to each other over lunch or over dinner or during the break, what have you done about that? And all of the sessions, all the workshop sessions, are that highly collaborative kind of areas where conversation can happen. So I really encourage you that if you feel like you're alone, you won't feel like you're alone afterward, and you'll walk away with people who, through Facebook and through Twitter, and you'll be able to stay in contact with and really develop encouraging relationships with over time. So thanks,
it seems like every year someone catches me on the way out and they're crying and they said, I was planning on quitting my job because I just didn't feel qualified or didn't feel like I could do it. And after MinistryCOM, I feel like I'm going to give it another try. And it's like, wow, man, that really hits me hard.
Cheryl, I didn't think you were going to tell about that private conversation that you and I had, that I was going to quit and didn't feel qualified.
I didn't mention any names of either one of us. But I do appreciate you being here for this webcast. Next month, we'll be back 1 hour. So if you're in Central Time, we'll be at 1 o'clock instead of at noon. Everybody else push back an hour from wherever you came. We will take the recording from this session and try and get the website by Monday or Tuesday. I've got a day job that interferes with my MinistryCOM work sometimes. But I'll try real hard to get this thing recorded, get the recording saved and updated to the website, because we do want you to share this. And maybe you can share this with your leadership and maybe convince them that there's some professional training would help everyone. So next session will be Thursday, September 16th, 1 p.m. You can sign up on the website for reminders. Invite a friend, come join us. MinistryCOM's coming up October 20th, 22nd. We'll be in Dallas this year. We've got a tour of some of the really creative churches in the area. We'll have some details on that coming up probably next week. And we'll see you next month. Thank you very much. Evan, thank you.
Thank you, Terrell. Bye-bye.